Hello, everybody. Kirk Spano with Scott Shooter Henderson. Primary waves. We're going to talk about Bitcoin for the most part today. We'll go through a few other things like the dollar and TLT and the stock market, but we're going to focus on Bitcoin today because I just did 45 minutes on why you should be buying Bitcoin. Shooter is going to try to tell us how to do it. How are you doing today, Shooter?
Hey, I am doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I had a good Thanksgiving. I know that yours was mixed. And
It was good, though. I mean, it's just, it was nice to see everybody, that's for sure. Ate too dang much.
Yeah. I made that chumpkin cake, by the way. I made the cheesecake, pumpkin pie, pecan pie, graham cracker, ginger snap crust cake pie thing.
Yeah.
And it turned out pretty darn good.
And
make it again.
Who's got a really good pecan pie and you'd never think about it, and it's only $10, is Denny's.
Really?
They sell the whole freaking pie.
$10?
For $10, yeah.
Huh. Well, next time I'm out at 2:30 in the morning, that might be where I stop. It'll depend on if I win or lose at poker that night.
Yeah, there was one right next to my hotel for 3 days, so we ate a lot there.
Okay. All right. So you got the dollar chart up right now. Tell me about this.
Well, right now we've just put in what looks like our cycle wave 2. Up here is this top at 107.05.
Okay.
And, our next count, we're looking for maybe a 102 and a bounce to maybe 103. Then I think we continue to break down. Count supports substantially lower from there. Now, that, to me, is extremely bullish for equities.
I agree.
Yeah. Nice catalyst, that's for sure.
Yeah. And that could coincide with, look at that time frame you have there. That could coincide with the Federal Reserve having a special facility, don't call it QE, to help out the banks.
Yep.
All right. So we see the dollar getting a little bit weaker here for a while. What else will that drive?
We could stay in this range for a while, too. This flat, we actually could double out in this flat before it breaks down. So, we could go all the way out to July of 2024 between this 107 and this 98 before it breaks down. Because it doesn't usually, this type of catalyst is not as aggressive as these little drawdowns like this, that are pretty much within range. Okay. Because it's such a controlled instrument anyways. So, the Fed has a big handle on this, and they're only going to let it go in one direction or the other based on the treasuries and market conditions too. So,
all right. So what does that mean for stocks?
Well, we're flat if it stays in that range.
Okay.
That's where we can end up in that chop. So, when you come up to, just switching gears here, going to the S&P, we're getting a little overbought up here. We're getting, we're not confirming on RSI, but I think we're putting in another mound like over here in the left. So, we should put a little flat in here in this resistance band between the October 2012 high and the August 2021 low in that resistance band there.
Okay.
By the way, when I mark these labels, those are what are referred to as off numbers. So that's the close of the day, the week, the month, whatever, however I'm marking it. I typically track the weekly and the monthlies because they're so significant. They're basically floor pivots for all the floor traders. And that's when you have a lot of the funds execute their orders. So it's very important for me. So if we're getting on that top, like we're bouncing off of that October 2012 resistance. So for us to put in that shallow high, obviously there were quite a few traders selling up there. So they were seeing this resistance line just like I am.
Okay. So if the dollar stays firm,
the range is pretty broad because I think my bias hasn't skewed on the Middle East. And obviously what we're seeing, and we're not just seeing it in the Middle East, but we're seeing India and China, conflicts on the border, Pakistan on the border as well. So, I think we continue to see that. So I think our concern is how much those swan events, if they happen, are going to affect us. And, I think you've nailed the nail right on the head when it comes down to Israel. I think the market's now we've sort of accepted it. So unless there's a huge catalyst, I don't think it draws us down either at this point because we've gotten beyond that time window. The market has accepted it. So, most likely outcome here is a grind higher, which is what this chart shows. It shows us back testing to maybe 453 this coming week. So maybe $2 or $3 lower. I wouldn't be concerned at all if we got 50% of this leg. I always think that way. I think it halves because it's a simple way to see it. Right. Just like we have this leg, we back tested 50%. We got this leg, we back tested 50%. We got this leg, we blew above 50%. So now we're going to put in a higher low here and then continue higher. How deep that is, I don't know. That's very hard to predict in all circumstances. But we've broken out of this megaphone pattern that we had, which is good. We gapped up, but I'd still rather see that gap fill before we head higher, because then it would be much more constructive to the upside, and we'd have a little more euphoria or FOMO on that push to the upside.
All right. So let me jump in right here. One of the big lessons I've learned in my life is that symmetry is how people think.
Yep.
And everywhere from science to beauty. And what we've discovered, and if you haven't watched Lessons in Chemistry, and I believe it's Apple, watch Lessons in Chemistry. Great show. And they cover some pretty important points that you can transfer to trading and investing. People think in halves because it's symmetric. It's an easy way to visualize.
Agreed.
Here's what I will tell you. If you can start thinking and really at least stop yourself and try to visualize other ways other than linear ways of thinking, you will do much, much better. My trading has become much, much better since I kicked myself in the rump a few years ago, because I have really focused on thinking in gaps and asymmetric moves and curves, lack of a better way of saying logarithms, rather than in lines. So if you can think in curves and gaps instead of lines, you are going to become much more comfortable with the randomness of the madness of crowds. You'll stop asking that question that irritates the shit out of me, which is, why did the price go up or down today? Why didn't this headline mean that? Why didn't that headline mean the other thing? Because you really shouldn't give a zuck.
I can tell you why price goes up and down every day.
Yeah, I know you can.
But you know why?
Why?
Because I'm on the other side of that trade.
Oh, it's all about shooter. I knew it was all about shooter. I didn't know how. I knew it was all about shooter. Yeah, so, the point I'm making is that I know people want to trade, and the way that we think works against us. So you have to have a very concerted effort to think in gaps and curves, and that will help you immensely. It'll make looking at these charts mean a lot more to you and be a lot more useful to you. Is that something that you kind of agree with? I hope so.
Yeah, I do. I stay in a very tight box. I mean, Elliott wave really is a roadmap for me.
Right.
It gives me an idea of my trend, and I can scale down to my trend. I can look at my long trend, my weekly trend, my daily trend, my hourly trend. But otherwise, I'm extremely focused on volume profile when I'm entering or exiting on my personal trades.
And that's something that you've added.
Seller euphoria stops.
Yeah, and that's something that you've added more to in the last couple of years, right?
I've right now I'm becoming a PhD on it. It's okay. My average book is up almost 62% since I've implemented the new volume imprint study that I'm using. It's very cumbersome to run.
Yep.
But honestly, I've projected. It's sick how much I've projected out where it's going to take me in the next 24 months. It's sick. It really is.
So based on something that somebody said in the chat room, can you please pull up your NVIDIA chart?
My NVIDIA. Go to.
So here's what somebody says in the chat. Shooter, your NVIDIA chart was spot on. I sold right at the peak, and now I'm waiting for the next lower price.
Beautiful. So we're looking at, let me just come in here. It overshot my count a little bit, but that's, it's always expected. So, looking at this count, our next target, just updating this real quick, would be down around 435 should be our breakdown. And then we should continue to head higher, maybe towards about 534. Now, the one thing, I want to say this isn't etched in stone. Elliott wave is not etched in stone, nor is it how I work with it.
Whoa. Wait. I've heard other Elliott wave guys that say this is the law, this is the way I have spoken.
I don't agree.
Argue with me.
Now there's a basis for that, but I think the spread or the margin of error is something that is really keen on focusing on, because just like, for example, how I look at my retraces, and this is why I look at ABC correct. Basically, there are two types of legs: motive waves up, which are these legs up, and then corrective legs, which are all of the flats, everything that come out of a corrective leg, no matter what they are, all 9 of them, are some form of an ABC pattern. And, to some degree, you have to simplify your life, because if you spend your whole day on a chart saying, okay, it's this pattern, no, it's not that pattern, it's that pattern, it's this pattern, you're spending all your freaking time in a chart trying to figure out what freaking pattern it is, and half the time it's not right. So what I've gone to is I've gone to a very simple format, and I look at corrective legs. I like counter trend. I like to trade corrective legs because they're quicker. Like when you get, drive 1, you have your confirmed high, right? You get your next drive, really, that's a 3 drive up there. But off of this high, if you took it short, you got a pretty good shot at 50% back of your last leg. And that little box is what I like to stay in. I just stay right in that little box. And the reason is, to me, it's very predictable. Now, what I'll do is I'll leave some runners. So, let's say we have this little corrective leg right here, right? It's extended just a little bit. So I look at the ABC pattern as, hey, this is equality, right? And then, the next possible outcome is that it may extend. So maybe I leave some runners on in my trade, right? Or it becomes elongated. And really what that is it adds, basically it's 50% of A, this is A, B, and that's C. So your extended leg is 50% from equality. So here's equality, right? Then you add 50% of A, right? So that's your extended leg. And then your elongated leg is another 50%. And you're pretty much in that box 70% of the time. So, Elliott wave to me is it's liquid, it's live. It expresses the FOMO of a buyer who they have the fear of missing out. Realize there's only so many Tesla owners in the world, right? And there's only so many Tesla owners who buy the stock. So now all of a sudden there's a major crash with Tesla, or they have a recall on all these batteries. Well, a percentage of these buyers are going to freak out, and FOL is going to occur, FOL as I call it, which is fear of loss. So now they're going to fear that they're going to lose money, so they sell it. The fact is that is what Elliott wave measures as a full picture. So there's an extreme on either side, no matter which way you look at the chart. And that's one reason you go out and use time frames. And I'm just going to go out to time frames on NVIDIA as an example. Now you'll notice where the buyer exhaustion occurred here on a monthly chart. This is a weekly label, by the way. So I measured it. Just go back to the weekly so you can see where I measured it. So the close of that candle, that high, that buyer exhaustion to the top, that euphoria, that FOMO, when it ends, I want to know where that is on my charts. Same thing as a bottom. I want to know where that fear of loss ended at the bottom of my charts. And I want to see that in all time frames down to the daily. And I usually can step down. I don't know if I have NVIDIA marked down to dailies or not. Maybe not. Yeah, I do have some daily on there. So, in that situation, you can see where that FOMO ends and where that full ends to the downside. And then you end up with these ranges that you can trade or invest in, of course. Does that make sense?
It does. And I thank you very much for all of that, because I think that's what I was trying to prod. The one thing that I would correct is that it is Zuckin. So just get it into your collective mindset. Zuckin. Got it? Zuck. Not the other word, just in case we ever go big time and the FCC starts to listen.
Understand.
Say Zuck. He won't say it. All right, what's
You're
that?
already watching me, I can tell you that. Only with how much I'm trading.
All right. So somebody else mentioned Riot Blockchain, which is another one that you follow. And folks, we don't normally cover stocks on this show, but I just wanted Shooter to be able to give you some examples. And Riot is in line with what we want to talk about next, which is Bitcoin. So
let me go back and cover the NASDAQ and TLT, and then we'll jump into crypto. How's that sound?
Sure.
Just so, I work in these boxes. You get me outside of my boxes, I forget things.
All right.
Okay, so now we got
as I get older, I understand that even more.
Yeah, it just keeps it simple for me. I can just look at the box and roll, So now we got a new high on this breakout. I think we head towards all time.
Okay.
So I think that 428.96 is very viable here. So I think we got a nice push coming. So wherever our back test comes in, whatever that breakdown occurs, it should be above this resistance band. I'd love it if it tagged this breakout line right here at 370, 374. It will launch from right there. I love this look.
Okay.
After we've had a nice constructive, 3 drive to a bottom here without any divergence really in the low. I mean, the whole leg is divergent.
Explain the 3 drive to folks real quick if you can,
okay,
because that's a pretty important point.
Yeah, a 3 drive is when you have a higher, and I'm talking on the bullish side, a higher high in price and a higher high in RSI. Bing, right? Now, they can duplicate in patterns, so you have to sort of take a visual. Each leg can have a higher high in price and a higher high in RSI, which is referred to as a confirmed high, okay? Then what you're looking for is, at that point, there's about a 90% chance you get at least a one more divergent high, which would be a higher high in price, and if I draw here, so this is our confirmed high, right? This is our divergent high. So we got a higher high in price, but a lower price in RSI. Now that's referred to as divergence. And it's one of the most successful tools to judge tops and bottoms. And that's where I love to say, or stay as far as my counter trend trades, when they're high and tight, just like this, high and tight, which is why you see this marked on the chart, because it's telling me that's a nice high. I don't have my floor, but we had our confirmed low here, right?
Yep.
See down here, right here. And then we had one more divergent low, then it broke up, right? Now we've got not a confirmed low, but we have a lower number in price and a lower RSI figure. Then we put in almost a flat, but we still had a divergent low below there. So, really that was a tradable low. This was a tradable high. This was a tradable low, et cetera, et cetera. Make sense?
It does. And I would point out that back when I still played baseball, I would get the high and tight every spring. It was a good haircut.
All right, great. Well, let's jump over to TLT. Now, we came in a little shallow on my count. I had 92.64 last week. It looks like we've come off of that. And I think we're heading back for our lows around 83. Now realize this is a flat that's building out on the bottom, which happens often after a confirmed low. So we have our confirmed low, our divergent low, and now we're building out our base for a launching pad back up to the upside. However, when I step out in time on TLT, we've got substantial downside here, maybe as low as 80.51. So this was our intermediate wave 4. So we're looking for our intermediate wave 5 down here, which is also a primary wave 3, by the way. Then we bounce back up towards our 4. And then ultimately we put in our primary wave 5. And, in this scenario, this would be my primary wave setup that I've devised, which really is just a method to trade bottoms and tops. That is just a simple way for us to scale in. It keeps I designed it for I suffer from sleep apnea. So sometimes I'm really tired when I get up and I don't function well. So I really designed it so I could wake up in the spur moment, have one eye closed and be able to pick something and trade it. That was really how I came up with the idea. We'll have our primary wave setup that comes in around 80.51. And I'm just trying to get it so it's visual the way I want to see it. And, then at that point, we should start our cycle wave. Realize this purple label is a super cycle. The blue is a cycle. So this is a very large pattern back up to the upside that is going to be mitigated by the Fed. So this is a huge trade. As a matter of fact, if this trade, TLT, does not pay for your membership in fundamental trends, guys, you're doing the wrong thing. It should pay for at least the next 5 or 10 years.
This is the one that we call possibly the trade of the year in 2024. And we're about to get the Bitcoin, which I think will probably be the trade of the year, but this is the more traditional trade of the year. And one thing I would say about getting back into the low 80s on TLT is the scenario that the market is suggesting could happen is if the Federal Reserve, if Jay Powell is really, really mean, right? I just classify him as either mean or nice. If he's really mean in December, then I think maybe you see rates go up a little bit and TLT come down a little bit. But if he's just kind of like mellow Uncle Jay, or even really nice handing out money Uncle Jay, which I don't see that coming for until next year sometime. But if Jay Powell is mean in December, then you maybe get your retest to the bottom or a new low on TLT, in which case buy the heck out of it, right? We get a price in the low 80s, you want to buy the heck out of it. Shooter.
Yep.
If we get that low price on TLT in the low 80s, you want to buy the heck out of that, right?
Yep. I wouldn't even hesitate scaling from here. When I'm looking at this is our floor at 80.91. We tagged that trend support channel. We tested the bottom of it once. We tested the high of it 3-4 times. I mean, that might have been our low. It could be, but my challenge here is we really haven't done a 30 RSI, but historically, at least the chart I have on TLT, that hasn't occurred with the history of this chart, as far as this ETF.
Right.
So, I would rather tag the 30 RSI, because then that would be significant towards the bottoming pattern, because historically with most charts, that's the case.
Right.
But the reality is we could be close to a bottom already. And here again, going back to Elliott Wave as being a liquid tool, it's only measuring what buyers and sellers are doing now.
Right.
So we really, projecting out in the future, has a margin of error. So, and I would say $10 on TLT is a margin of error, just historically looking where we are. So, we've put in the bottom here, right? We put in the bottom here. We put it in the bottom here. This clearly is a flushing low, right? Now the question is are we wrong about getting another low of 80.51? I think is the best question to ask. And I would say that we get a weekly close above 97.66, then our low might be in, and then we're looking for the back test low to probably start scaling in, and it might be above where we are at 89. So that's the way that I look at the charts. I've not started scaling in. I am looking at February, and the reason I'm looking at February is because of the commodities buying cycle with China. Specifically copper. Historically they buy every 6 months. Causes a lot of fluctuations in treasuries, because quite often the treasuries are used to cover those transactions. So, I think that's going to be a catalyst. I want to be positioned a little before February. So probably the second or third week of January, I'll start scaling into something long-term. I'm going to look at, January 25 and January 26 options on TLT. And I'm going to go well in the money. I'm going to be well over 110 or 120 calls on those when I do that.
Wow. Okay. Well, I will be following along, because this is above my pay grade, and I'm trusting you to figure this one out. I just know the big stuff. All right. Crypto. Let's talk some Bitcoin.
And actually, let me go just to one other moment here and see if I could switch and my thingy works. Okay. Now, before we really jump into the charts themselves, I wanted to talk about the halvings. And basically this is when the return for the miners, when you're mining Bitcoin on the decentralized exchange, basically they cut the number of Bitcoin you get in half, okay? And our next halving is coming in 2024. Now, if we'll look back to the third halving, what occurred, was in 2020. And we had this huge rally, right? And then our halving prior to that was in 2016, and we had this huge rally. Then our first halving, we had this minor rally. Well, the one thing I'd like to point out is that the halving is basically delivered a 3 to 10x increase in the value of Bitcoin after the halving. So if we look at our high here, change $15, whatever it was, right?
Right.
And our next halving here is roughly 15,000, right? What's that, 10,000%?
Yeah.
And then if we look from our prior 15,000 to our new high, we put in, our first high would have been just shy of 60,000. So, this was 10x, this was 3x. So my assumption, and I'm just going to, visualize this here, is that our Bitcoin could be way the heck up here at $150 to 200K, because it should have a higher jump in this price based on that next halving. So, I mean, I'm thinking we're going to be way the heck up here in this range,
Right.
if I could show it as far as a visual.
So
Make sense?
Yeah, and in the Investing 2020s webinar earlier, I talked about this and I showed the market cap charts, which looks just like this. Now, the one thing that we're not showing, and if we could, I would, I just don't have it, is the logarithmic chart of this. If you take a look at the price on 11/28/12 to 2016 in July, 12 to 600, right? That's quite the jump. It's a 50x.
Yeah.
And then from 657, the high was like 19,000. So that is, again, 35 or 40x. And then it came down. And then the next one was from about 10,000 to about 60,000. That's 6x. So the magnitude is getting smaller. However, it's on bigger numbers.
Yeah.
So even if this is only
1.5x.
Yeah, well, the last one was 6, down from, starting at 50. Let's say this is just a 3x.
That puts us 120K though.
That's right. It's a big number. So, I think that adoption through the ETFs and with the emerging markets and the family offices, which we've talked about, I think maybe we get another 6x, or maybe those rises, it was more the law of small numbers on the very front end, and maybe we do get another 10x. I don't have a good way of valuing how the supply and demand for Bitcoin is going to shake up.
I can't measure the derivatives. That's
right.
That's the catalyst I can't measure, because realize derivatives has not hit Bitcoin at all.
But
I mean, as a comparison, if we look what has been done in leverage, for example, in mortgage-backed securities, in bonds, etc., right? We have what, $150 trillion in leveraged real estate, and if a piece of that derivatives market shifts into Bitcoin, I can't even fathom where we would be.
Well, and it's going to happen. Here's why. I know you're busy this week. Did you see what was announced this week? They are going to allow leveraged Bitcoin trading on the commodities exchange now.
Yeah,
so
I saw it.
Starting next year sometime.
Yeah.
So that means that you have this series of catalysts coming. While I love the TLT trade, I think that for most people it's the traditional trade to make.
Yeah.
I think this could be multiples higher.
Yeah.
Not beat it by 20% or 40% or 50%.
There's
micro 1,000%.
There's micro Bitcoin contracts, and you can buy a year out in time for not a bad price.
Yeah.
Where it's basically a tenth of what Bitcoin is as far as a cost, right? And you can buy slightly in the money or at the money, and you still will have the leverage to the upside. The only downside with futures is you can go flat in the red and lose what capital you have in there if we have an outlier swan event, aka somehow we get a quasi ban in Bitcoin. You can end up losing more money than you put in. That's the only downside to that. All right. Well, let me rephrase that. That's a big downside to a micro Bitcoin or a Bitcoin futures trade.
Lessons in Zuckin margin.
Yeah, right. It's not margin. You lose real money on that. Right. I got hit in the treasuries. One day I'll have to tell you that story. But man, that was not a good day. That candle was my entire screen in the opposite direction. So and let me get my one other chart I wanted to pop up here for you. Let me find it. See if I got it here. I lost my directory. I can't. One of these days, I'm going to have to get you to show me how to do that. Okay, I'm not going to find it right this second. So I'm going to go back to Bitcoin.
Oh, that really is to the moon. I said that really is to the moon.
Yeah.
You have to maximize it.
Hey, you see that now?
Yes, there you go.
Okay, I wanted to show the discount for GBTC to spot.
Down to 8%.
Yeah.
So that's basically pricing in an almost certainty that it becomes an ETF.
Yeah, it is. I totally agree with that. But that way, that's why I think Kathy liquidated her positions there.
Well, she knows, right? Because she's got insider information. She knows that she's going to get her Bitcoin ETF over at ARK, and then she'll just buy her own ETF inside of the ARKW fund.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm back on Bitcoin.
All right.
I'm really good with charts. I really stink with computers.
So what are we seeing? How is this breakout going to happen? Could there be a little pullback?
Well, we're building just like, I was showing the flat on the downside with TLT. We're building out a flat to the top side on Bitcoin at this point. Right now, our next target, we've gotten our confirmed high, which is here, right? So we've got a divergent high. So it's still a 2, right? And we really have put in a 3 here. So, historically, you get a decent back test on a 3, which I think comes in at 397. So I think there's a possibility we get a broader 4 here. But at the moment, the count is reading it as a 97,737 minor wave 3 high right here. And then we get a shallow back test to 38,771. And then we put in our intermediate wave 3 at 40,333 with a shallow back test to 38,995. So I see stability in this topping flat, ultimately where our final target should come in around 41,120. And then we get a real decent back test off that primary wave 3 of a little over $6,000 as a retrace to the downside.
So this chart is basically showing the potential for the ETFs not to really hit the market for a while, and maybe there be some bad news. What if sentiment turns up? What does it look like if sentiment is the other direction? If it's not so flat and it's more...
Okay, let's look at the intermediate wave. This is our wave 1, which is in at 37,971, right? Now, wave 3 is typically the longest wave. Right now, the count is measuring that as basic equality. It's assuming 3 is shallow just because of this building base right here. But 3 could go to here, 4 could go up to here, and our primary wave 3 could shoot somewhere around 53K. In other words, wave 3 would become the longest wave, and wave 5 becomes a traditional wave, which is about 3/4 the size of wave 1.
Right.
That is the most logical outcome for most what motive waves, which are called impulse waves, which is where you have some symmetry to the retraces. So wave 2 is a little broader than wave 4, but it doesn't classify as a leading or ending diagonal. A leading diagonal would be much deeper, or an ending diagonal would be in wave 4 is much deeper.
Right. Can you show us the 461.8 way up there? So you have to scrunch your chart together a little bit.
461.8?
Yeah. They don't happen very often, but when they do, pretty exciting.
The fib extension, you mean?
Yeah. I see 423, so you just don't have the...
I don't have it on that.
You don't have the 461. So, that's that run towards 100,000.
I don't have it on there, that's all.
Yeah. That's that run towards 100,000.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll happen next year, but it's in the range of possibility as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I don't have it on either of my fib tools.
That's okay. They don't happen often, right? I'm trying to remember when the last one we saw was. It was NVIDIA.
They do, but, I usually measure the leg extensions.
Right.
I don't, it's very often do I go out and use a fib extension on the monthly.
Right.
Unless I'm looking at something specific there. There again, I stay right in that small little box where I'm at.
Right. I just wanted people to understand what I am thinking about.
Yeah.
And I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. That's the thing that people have to understand about me. I'm not an extremist on anything.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing what I'm seeing, and I just keep becoming convinced that we're going to see Bitcoin over 100,000. I said 2026, but I think actually by 2025. And I'm having a hard time convincing myself that's not true.
Yeah. Well, equality is 119,328, like I have on my chart now.
Yeah.
And that's it. We have the structure. We have our confirmed high, our divergent high. So our third drive would be over there, and I can't imagine it happens that quick, but this was pretty aggressive. This push was pretty aggressive.
Right.
Equality, I have what actually is my date.
Is it January of 2025?
Yeah, June of 2024. And that's just, again, that's another thing that I've I like things simple, where I'm repetitive and looking at it, and determine where my margin of error or margin of safety is. And then, obviously I compensate for that by position size or strike. But what I'm looking is leg one was 19,870 to 64,900, which, by the way, when you see these even numbers like that, bing, those quite often are tops. We have 0 in price. And that's because the dealers have filled prior orders at that price. So, Buku Whale is going to sell, 500 million worth of Bitcoin at 64,900. So it pushes the price up there when it gets close, and they fill all of those orders. So equality is from that leg to this leg, and the third leg, I'm assuming it's, I've got a little bit of a range there. I'm assuming it extends like this leg. So we get our first high here, and then we get one more high up here around 119.
Okay.
Now jumping over to GBTC. Now those of you who've been around for us a while, I think most of you were in by 840. We had our primary wave set up at 746. We had that 2 drive to the bottom, and then we scaled. Then I took partials up here on this leg, and then I started scaling back in, from this low. Now we're riding this last leg up to, what our next target. And by the way, it's extended a little bit, based on the new count. We're up at 3293 is where we should hit our primary wave 3. Now, one thing I'd also like to point out is we got a really aggressive confirmation on RSI with this high. All right, now realize it's not a total higher high in price, but that's still aggressive for a midterm confirmation. So that suggests that we get this type of drawdown from 32 to 28, but we could come all the way back down to the 50-day here. And it would not be out of the ordinary for that to occur with this type of euphoria. Make sense?
Yep. Can you show us ARKW real quick, since a lot of people have used that for some of their Bitcoin exposure?
Target now is 78.78. We got a breakout that's going to be coming in around 68.26. We're not really, RSI sort of nowhere, so we got a lot of room on RSI, so that 3 could push for sure.
Okay.
Because it's shallow. Just my first thought when I look at that. Nice flat though. I mean, this high was good, higher high, So, I would expect that we'd be at a higher high here. And then that back test, is really going to tell us whether we launch. I mean, because we could launch here.
Yeah. What stocks do you like that are Bitcoin related? I know somebody mentioned Riot in the chat here recently.
Okay, let me jump over to crypto and go into that. Okay. First, I really like XRP here.
Ripple.
And part of the reasons is we've had more noise on banking institutions adopting Bitcoin. Chase and Bank of America are using it in some form to change funds. And for the longest period of time, we had this flat with a base that wasn't giving me a count that was bullish. And I think it was 2 weeks ago that count did flip bullish. And now from where we are, we're about 62 cents. And, my primary wave 3 is up here at 327. So, it's about a 6x move from here to the upside. So that is my most optimist view here for crypto at the moment, because it has the catalyst of possibly becoming the preferred transfer of funds for the banking institutions. So, all right, let's look at Marathon. Marathon, I've traded this thing, God knows, probably 1,000 times. We've now got a bullish count. The one thing with miners that I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot of these breakdown legs. So we have an impulse leg to the downside off of that $15. That also could coincide with the halving in January 24th, okay? Because their profitability gets whacked. So chasing the miners really in after that halving is I'm going to scale back on those, and hopefully I'm able to take profits then on my Hive and my Bitfarms position. But, let me just go through, Riot. We looked at it briefly. Riot, to me, it looks bearish, as far as the look on the daily. And I don't have my labels marked up on this, but, it looks like it's going to break down. I would rather it do from 50% back, though. I mean, when I look at this, I'm always thinking, hey, what's my count? Right. Where am I at? I'm just measuring this leg here. So taking our trough, our low, and our peak, and our trough, and throwing in my golden boxes up here, that would target about $14. I'd rather it be in that box, inside that box.
Right.
And then, maybe it breaks down from there. That would be a little bit more of aggressive breakdown. But if we don't get higher price, this is just going to meander here till it falls off a cliff, is my thought on Riot.
Right.
So I'm not really excited about any of the miners, even though I'm still scaling in Hive and Bitfarms, because that's I part of the reasons is their percentage of Bitcoins they hold versus what they mine, which is really good numbers. And Bitfarms is the lowest cost producer. So looking at Hive, we've got this base here again. We've got that B instead of a wave 2, we've got a B, which indicates we may get up to $5.30 and then break down. And then in Bitfarms, right now we're getting clobbered. They just had, I think it was a $30 million or a $60 million funding at $1.37, and the stock came off from that. So maybe we put in this 2, and head towards 169, and maybe get that up leg going at some point, and maybe head towards 381. Now I like Monster or MST MicroStrategies, excuse me. I just don't like the price. It's not cheap. The options aren't cheap. So I don't ever like deep spreads where ask is $8 and bid is $5. It turns me off and I start looking elsewhere. But I like the chart. I do.
Right.
And MicroStrategies looks like maybe 863. But if I was a common share buyer, which I'm really not, this is a stock that has substantial upside, and it probably makes sense to scale this with some kind of Bitcoin position. If depending on how you're structuring your trade, it's been one of the most consistent trends to the upside off of the bottom. So we got our confirmed low and our divergent low, and we just went. We never look back.
Can you show us Square?
I got to figure out where I've got it first. Square. Over there. There it is. I've got it in mid cap.
There you go.
Okay, so here again, now we've overshot our RSI structure, which doesn't necessarily kill the upside. It's just we have an issue here. We've overshot 2 primary wave setups, which is indicative of significant underlying weakness. I classify in the business. All right, that's just the way I look at that. When that trigger breaks that many times, something's going on that I'm not seeing from the tape. But at the same time, the count suggests we're heading towards 105 from where we are now. However, it's sort of a staggered impulse to the upside. What I mean by staggered is it's not uniform in the structure to the upside, and those often fail. So if we see any price rejection, we should see it somewhere between the 8-day and our prior high around 90. So if we see any kind of rejection in price right around 90, chances are we're going to roll back over and still put in another lower low. Because I have a ghost print down here around $15, I think, or $14.30 that came back on one of the counts that I ran in the prior couple of weeks or months that I've noted on the chart.
All right. So here's what I know about Square MicroStrategy, and I mentioned it in the other webinar. They're both companies that have businesses that are just their business. I think Square has a better business than MicroStrategy. And by the way, they're both top 10 holders of Bitcoin. Now, with Square, I think that the weakness has been because this is a very unloved economic expansion. And I think that there is general pessimism about the United States economy, about the emperor is dying, has no clothes, and is about to fall off a cliff. Now, you know that I take the opposite view. I take the contrarian view that the U.S. economy is way stronger than people give it credit for. And eventually, people will come around to that way of thinking. And then at that point, I'll probably get bearish again. So I'm super bullish because I don't think the bearish narratives are correct. I think that they're just out there. And ultimately, Square, because it's tied to small and medium-sized business, does very, very well as this economic expansion takes off. And especially as the real estate transition and what's got to happen in the Treasury and banking sectors adds liquidity to the markets next year. So I think Square, you got a 4x target one here from where it is now versus MicroStrategy, which was only 2x.
Right.
So I like Square an awful lot because of the upside if we ever start realizing what a great place this is.
Yeah. Well, didn't they lose something on one of the they had something on the App Store, I think, that they lost. I think they lost it on two platforms. I'm not recalling. Teresa probably knows. She probably can chime in on that. I'm not recalling right this second, but they lost something that was a significant part of their book. So I think that's what this was. This drawdown here.
I don't know. That's pretty consistent. Yeah. The run up and the drawdown are just consistent with the FOMO and the collapse that we had after COVID. Really, this has been if you get rid of that giant peak and then you just look at what that chart would be, you basically have 4 years of basing.
Yeah, well, this was a golden boy stock. They were trading this.
Yeah, it's going to happen again and again. And a lot of money, and you touched on it. I think there's a lot of Tesla money that's going to go into a basket. And I think included in that basket is potentially Square. I think included in that basket is potentially Ford. If you go over to Swaggy Stocks, they tell you what the popular stocks are. And if Tesla isn't the golden child, then that money has to find a home. And if the markets get more liquid, those stocks find a home. I think you're going to see a diversification in the stocks that do really, really well in a more liquid market where Tesla isn't and Nvidia aren't sucking up as much of the money. My opinion, it's probably wrong. I'm usually wrong,
Oh, if Nvidia ever gets that new chip, because I heard they got that delayed, or they delayed the new China chip. But I'm surprised it hasn't pulled off more aggressively than it has at this point.
Yeah, well, at least for the next few years, the AI machine build-outs are high enough that Nvidia can't fill all the demand no matter what. So they're not too worried about it for a few years. When you're going to see the chips pull back on the AI side is A, as Intel gets into it, and B, just as the AI machines are built, right? I mean, once these machines are built and they've learned and they're just being used versus being built on the hype and whatnot. I mean, we're still in the AI hype cycle. There's a kick in the teeth coming eventually, and that's when Nvidia will get hit. I don't think it's for a few years, maybe 5 years, but just understand hype cycles and implementation cycles and when the money is really made, and there's usually two spots, the initial hype, and then which is fast, and then the over time, which is during the implementation. So I think that you're going to see some of the winners aren't going to be as big of winners anymore, and you're going to see a lot of companies that have been in bases for multiple years just freaking take off. All right, you got anything else for us in the Bitcoin crypto realm, Shooter?
Oh, I have Ethereum up. We've gotten our head above the breakout line.
Okay.
Honestly, I don't have a good beat on this one. I mean, we've been in this. It's not as euphoric by any means as Bitcoin, but during periods of time like we've had here in April, it had a euphoric push. So if we scale up, that 277 target is probably viable at some point.
Sure.
50% of this leg here, which is probably right about here. So I'd say at least 2387 if we don't extend that far. But realize wave one is here, and wave three could extend way the heck up here to 38 or 3847 if that wave becomes the longest wave, which obviously is the most likely outcome in an impulse leg. So
okay. All right.
But no, I think we covered pretty much everything I wanted to in crypto.
Oh, let's go. Let's finish off with Coinbase.
Coinbase.
Because Coinbase benefits from Binance getting busted and from Blackstone being their partner.
Didn't Binance settle?
Yeah, but they have severe restrictions now for a while.
Yeah, but they got the rest of the world going. That's one thing is, the U.S. doesn't capture much of the rest of the world's transactions, and Binance does that. That's one thing. So, I wish the U.S. was bigger in crypto than we are.
If there's a company that's going to do it, it's going to be Coinbase.
I would agree. But I don't know that they're going to take over those international markets that quick. That's my first thought.
Well, with the world dollarizing, we'll see.
Yeah. Now, Coinbase also has a breakdown look to it. Once we get past our 175, right now we're in a minor wave at 121.59. Then we break down to about $1.02. So if you're going to take a shot at Coinbase, I like it. I think I think I have an alert set on it at 105, but that would be our minor wave 4 down around 102.60. And let me just back out to the weekly.
I would buy a narrative-driven breakdown in Coinbase. I regret that
I would also buy the breakout.
Yeah. I regret not loading up on it in the 30s and 40s when I first talked about it.
Yeah, and I know somebody did. I don't remember if chime in.
I mean, it was on our list. I just
somebody bought it. I remember.
Yeah, well, and remember, I manage other people's money, so I was more careful. And
yeah,
in hindsight, it's one of those stocks I was like, oh.
I'm just so tight in my box into the end of the, because this is the time of year I don't like trade. Friday was actually a good thing. I was in and out of the market in less than 3 minutes and made 21% for the day. So that was a good day. I've not liked Black Fridays in the past, but I sure liked it. It was a good Friday. So, our next golden box is viable up here, 270.
Wow. Yeah. I think if it breaks out, you got to ride it. I agree with you. I want to see if it pulls back, the 60s or 70s. If it does, I'll buy it. And if it breaks out, I think I'll buy it.
Why screw around with it? Now you got me to say it. Why screw around with that with this look? It's a breakout candidate. All
right.
So I mean, if Bitcoin doesn't even have to run for Coinbase to run.
Okay.
In this flat, I mean, it's got its own technical look. Our primary wave setups down here. I don't even have it marked because I don't really track it.
So buy a little bit this week. If it doesn't break out, then get out and buy back later.
Yeah, I would even scale. You could do. Maybe even. I mean, they're going to cost you, but you could scale in. Just slightly in the money. They're a little more expensive. 110 calls.
Okay.
Because you got 102s here, right? And just plan if it's going to go up to our 3 and scale back in, put like 10% on now, 10% at our 3, 10% on the back test, 10% on the back test, 10% on the back test. Then we get back above the break line, you load your full position targeting that 175. And those 110s should pay well, and you'll probably want to roll them out, 3, 4, 5 weeks before their expiration, because they'll be well in the money. I would say $3 to $5 anyways. And that way you have a little insulation. That would be how I would look at this as far as Coinbase now.
Yeah. All right.
So February 110s and plan on scaling on those.
All right. So let's finish up with, Bitcoin is the other trade of the year in 2024. Somebody asked about Bitcoin ETFs. The reason I had Shooter talk about miners is because I'm not very bullish on the miners, because they will suffer from the halving. Now, at some point, some of the miners will bottom and then turn back up, because I do believe in the long run they become alternative energy providers. However, that's a big pivot. That's a long transition. And, I don't think there's a lot of certainty in the miners. So I'm not in them, and I wouldn't buy an ETF that's heavy in miners. I like Square. I like Bitcoin. I like Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. That's where I want my focus to be.
And the reason I'm in Bitfarms is the cost to print a Bitcoin is right at $9,000, a little under. They have the lowest cost producer of Bitcoin pretty much in the world. They're about $50 below some of the Chinese miners that are getting free utilities,
right? Because
they use that hydro contract they have. They've got a huge dam that generates all the power, and they're paying a flat like 4 cents a kilowatt for their contracts. But the reason I'm scaling there is because of their Bitcoin holdings, the same with Hive, as a percentage of their P&L, because they've got upside with that on their P&L that's sort of like a reserve. So I don't know when they're strategically going to liquidate those or start selling that. But when they do start selling that, that's going to hit their P&Ls really hard to the upside.
Right.
Because they're saving 60 to 70% of the coins they're mining, whereas Marathon going through its struggle in Texas with the cost of utilities this summer just devastated their holdings. Otherwise, they would be on my list as well. I mean, they went down, they're 20% of the holdings of Bitcoin than they were at the beginning of 2022 because they were liquidating for operations. So, I like GBGC, and I can't wait for options to come. Hopefully it does come. Even micro Bitcoin futures, small position, small contract, slightly in the money. makes sense for me because you can buy smaller lots, and I'm coming to like micro contracts more so than the full contracts because I can still scale in. And, especially with Interactive Brokers, there's no major price difference between buying one full contract or a micro contract, or 10 micro contracts comparably. There's no expense difference whatsoever, whereas it used to be quite expensive. So it's, I think scaling in small blocks, building out your portfolio where you think you're interested. I like Ethereum still. I like XRP. I like GBTC. I like Hive. I like Bitfarms. I like Square. Okay. And I like Monster or MSTR,
right.
MicroStrategies.
On that energy story with the Bitcoin miners, with Bitcoin miners, equate it to gold miners, but with a kicker. The kicker is the energy throw off down the road. As far as gold miners, if you take a look at gold miners over the years, not a lot of them have survived, right? Yeah. So you really have, I think the same thing is going to play out in Bitcoin miners, except that they have the extra upside of being excess energy producers at some point.
Yeah.
So like one of the companies that has a really good energy story is up there on your chart, Iris. That's I don't know if you can click that. It's kind of middle right. Yeah. There you go. Almost. There you go. Iris Energy, they're a Bitcoin miner, but I think that they've nailed what their long-term story is going to be. So they have a cost competitive advantage for Bitcoin production, just like Bitfarms. So, this is a stock that I think will probably be one of the survivors, and it'll do very well. I don't know where to buy it just yet, but this is one of the ones that I've studied, and there's a half a dozen that I've really learned about. And the best Bitcoin miners are the ones with the best energy story, right? Lowest cost of production on their Bitcoin, and they're going to have excess energy to throw off at some point. So this could bottom way down in the ones, but ultimately...
Yeah, that's what the count currently suggests, but you do have a good structure on this. I'm just looking at the chart as you were talking.
Yeah.
You don't have, our above, which is way the heck from where we are, above 793 roughly, 799.
It could really break out.
Yeah, you're going to 17. Yeah. That's, so that would...
So these are the reasons why you subscribe to Fundamental Trends, is because, and get the rare service, because we're finding these types of trades and we're preparing for them. And, we're not just jumping in and saying, oh, I got to buy it because it's a good idea. No, we're looking for the spot. And if we can find the spot, reason. Yeah. If we can find the spot, which is step 4 in our 4-step process, right? Secular trends, government and central bank policy, fundamentals, and then what do the technicals say about where you should buy it? If we hit these trades, you have doubles and triples and quadruples, and, we'll accidentally hit a 10-bagger. So
what's GBT from $8.40 to 32?
Yeah. I wrote that article last year, and read the comments in that article, the GBTC article I wrote on Seeking Alpha. A lot of people calling me stupid while it tripled.
And I don't take victory laps very often.
Yeah, we're stupid. We're stupid. We tripled our money in a year on this.
Yeah.
We're dumb. Shooter, you're dumb. You tripled your money.
Yeah, I'm the
trolls initially bothered me, but they become the fuel. They become the fuel, right? They are the wood that I burn. And every now and then somebody makes a good point and goes, and I say to myself, I'm going to look that up. I'm going to figure out what this means. But 9 out of 10 of them, 4 out of 5 for sure, are just knuckleheads talking their own book and their own ignorance.
Yeah.
And somebody just put in the chat room.
Time for that.
Somebody in the chat room just said, I'm up 145% on Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. Guess I can't complain. Right.
Right.
All right. Last chance to buy Bitcoin, folks. I really think that you need to get into it by the end of the year. And when the announcements on the ETF come out, was there 6 of them that there's going to be? I think there's 6. I think they're all going to get announced at the same time. I don't think they're going to come in one at a time. I think it's going to be these 6 were approved, and these are the rules that they're following.
I think BlackRock comes first.
You think they actually let it come out first? I think as long as I think the SEC, from what I'm reading from the SEC, is trying to let them all go in parallel. I don't think they're going to do anybody any favors. I think that opens them up to lawsuits. They've already had a bad experience.
You recall that ever happening?
Yeah, they've had a pretty bad experience with lawsuits lately. You know who the biggest holder of Bitcoin in the world is, right?
Yeah.
Who?
The U.S. government.
Damn right. So
guess what? They didn't mine one of them, and they didn't buy one of them.
That's right. They've taken it from the criminals.
Yep.
And I'm just telling folks that the U.S. financial system is so strong that is going to propel us into leadership, and it's going to propel the price of Bitcoin up. And ultimately, there will be a crash, right? Because of FOMO, it always happens. However, the ride up has just begun in the last year, and it's not going to be a straight line. Remember, I talked about in the other program, actually in this program, I talked about think about gaps and curves, not straight lines. And you can see the potential for gaps up and a curve and a spike that will be epic. And ultimately, the United States does lead on all this. And the reason that the CEO of Kraken is pissed off is because he got cracked for not registering. That's why he got cracked. He didn't register. He went Bitcoin, DeFi, maximalist.
You know what's crazy about that?
Yeah, he said, zuck you to the government.
Well,
the
no,
government just said, zuck you back.
There's no way for a crypto exchange to register as a security with the SEC. There is not a method.
Well, but nobody who registered with the CFTC has gotten cracked.
Yeah, true. You have to register as a money transmitting business.
That's right.
Not as a security seller, because they don't even recognize it at this point.
Right.
So that's again, I'm going back to that chat. My frustration from being an investor is that I still have reservations about what is going to occur on the regulation side. And I just can't grasp the timeline myself there. So I'm in conservative mode, but my conservative mode is probably more aggressive than most of you. I've got 10% roughly in crypto. So, I would probably be at 50% if I was comfortable, but I'm a day trader too, so I'm, that's my bread and butter,
Right.
And, that is, so I just take my gains and I put them in little boxes where I want to put them. And, when we look at the future here, it's going to go. It's just how rough the ride's going to be. So when you structure any kind of position you have in Bitcoin, you have to assume the ride's going to be rough. And that's one reason I'm scaling, cost averaging into, both Hive, Bitfarms, and GBTC. And I'm doing that simply because it was the strategy I laid out as the most conservative way to keep a position on without potentially losing my shirt if it goes against me.
Right. I've scaled in as well. I've taken my poker winnings from offshore poker venues as Bitcoin. I sold a little bit at one point, so I had to declare it on my taxes. I declared it, and I've put money in. As I mentioned in the other broadcast, I'm 12% Bitcoin in my net worth. And, I think that you can be aggressive with Bitcoin if it's in your nature to be aggressive. Don't ever invest against your nature. Don't ever do something that's going to keep you awake at night. But if getting information and studying something helps you become comfortable enough to invest in something, then you should do it with Bitcoin, because the upside is tremendous. And then the indirect route of investing in stocks that have Bitcoin holdings, I think, is a good one. I think Square is one of the best ones. I mentioned Shooter likes MicroStrategy, and there are indirect ways of investing that are more traditional that will, maybe help you with your sleep quotient. Beyond that, otherwise, thank you very much, Shooter.
Thanks for having me.
My heart out to you for, having to deal with your dad. I'm glad that it was a good visit. I'm glad that you had a pretty good Thanksgiving. I think it's weird that your flight got caught, so you just called up and bought a car. Shooter, I'm sure we'll talk about that in the chat room. I'm gonna spill beans. So he called a car dealership after doing the research, said, "Hey, if you have this car here in an hour, I'll buy it." He said they were there in 58 minutes.
Yep.
It's the funniest thing I've ever heard, man. It's really, really the funniest thing I've ever
I
heard.
can be pretty persuasive. All I got to do is my credit.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. All right, everybody. I hope that a whole day talking Bitcoin helps you somehow. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and I'll get these up as quickly as I can.
All right, you guys have a great rest of your weekend. We'll catch you next time. Gals.
Peace out.